My message is abrupt climate change is leading to loss of habitat for human animals and ultimately to the extinction of our favorite species, Homo sapiens. And it's not a message that I bring great joy in telling people. I don't go up to small children on the street and say, "Hey, guess what? You die, ha ha ha." You know,
Guy McPherson is a scientist that has chosen to relocate to Belize to live a more simple life. He is the Professor Emeritus of Natural Resources and Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Arizona. Guy is best known for promoting the idea of near-term extinction, a term he coined about the possibility of human extinction as soon as the year 2030. If you would like to support the show or know more about us, sign up for our newsletter at deathhangout.com or click the button on screen. Now get ready for this episode, Coffee in Belize and the End of the World.
my message is abrupt climate change is leading to loss of habitat for human animals and ultimately to the extinction of our favorite species, Homo sapiens. And it's not a message that I bring great joy in telling people. I don't go up to small children on the street and say, "Hey, guess what? You die, ha ha ha." This isn't a jolly message. But I think it's important that people understand that we're headed for a climate that is incapable of supporting even the most clever species in the history of the planet.
I've interviewed you, or we had a conversation 2 years ago. Now you believe that this abrupt climate change actually is going worse. It's actually much more faster than you were expecting at the time. So very briefly, and I know that you have lots of data and scientific, things to back this up, but very briefly, can you tell us why you believe now we have, I believe, less than 10 years or 10 years now before we are all gone?
We've triggered so many self-reinforcing feedback loops, or what are commonly referred to as positive feedbacks, although they aren't positive for habitat for our species. We've triggered so many of these, and the combination of them, particularly the additive combination, or worse yet, the multiplicative combination of, for example, methane going exponential in the atmosphere. For example, the heating associated with carbon dioxide that's already in the atmosphere. There's about a 10-year lag between emission and maximum heating associated with those molecules. And you add those together, you add on the declining Arctic ice and therefore the absorption of heat by the blue ocean instead of the reflection of radiation by the white ice. You add all those things up and it looks like we're headed for a temperature at or near the highest experienced on this planet in the last 2 billion years. And it's difficult for me to imagine a scenario, given that humans have never persisted anywhere close to that temperature, that we will survive it. I just don't see there being much complex life on Earth with that kind of global average temperature occurring so quickly. And we're headed there in less than 10 years at this point. And, during the Great Dying 252.2 million years ago, the same or similar temperature was reached on Earth, but it took somewhere between about 900 and about 19,000 years. We're headed there this time in about a decade. So I just don't see us hanging around. And that time, 252.2 million years ago, more than 90% of the complex life on Earth went extinct. Sorry, more than 90% of life on Earth went extinct. Never mind complex organisms like us that depend upon so many other organisms for our own persistence, to clean the water, to pollinate the plants, to provide the food, to clean air. All of that depends on all these other organisms. And we're wiping them out way, way faster than has ever occurred in planetary history. So to think that we can destroy our own food and water and air, to assume that we can crap in our own nest forever and somehow come out unscathed seems a little ridiculous to me.
You think it's far too late? It's gone way past the point of actually really doing anything to change it now.
Civilization itself, this set of living arrangements that we sort of take for granted, that allows us the wonders of this conversation and posting it online, that itself is a heat engine. The civilization itself, whether we power it by solar panels and wind turbines or with fossil fuels, it's a heat engine, and this has been validated now by several papers in the very conservative refereed journal literature. So we can either keep this thing going, or we can shut it all down. And as it turns out, if we shut it all down, the absence of global dimming, or the so-called aerosol effect, when all the sulfates and other particulates fall out of the sky that are reflecting sunlight back up before it gets to Earth, when all those fall out, when we terminate this set of living arrangements, we achieve a very, very rapid rise in temperature in a very short period of time. We're talking an additional 3 degrees or so Celsius global average temperature rise in a few days or weeks. And I don't see any way for humans to survive that. So we can either keep the omnicidal heat engine of civilization going and keep driving to extinction at 150 to 200 species a day, or we can turn it off and drive ourselves and those other species to extinction even faster. Pick your poison. It's all poison.
I hear you talk, and I understand this intellectually, but still, there's hard time for me to compute that. And I remember we watched a TV interview that you done, I think in Australia or New Zealand, I believe. Australia, was it? And
New Zealand. Like with a few months with Paul Henry.
Do we have? How much time does the human race have?
I can't imagine there will be a human on the planet in 10 years. I suspect it'll be...
No, I'm sorry. Did you say 10 years?
Yes, in my out loud voice even.
Seriously, 10 years?
No, we don't have 10 years.
Yeah, and the TV host was just like stunned. It was just like, he couldn't, he had the... his producer whispering in his ear, and he said, "Yeah, it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter. We have less than 10 years. Really, nothing matters anymore, right?" And I think that there's a parallel with that, with actually this conversation, with the death conversation, Because to me, I have hard time, even if you have all the scientist background, I have hard time for me to accept that. But what you open here is a conversation. What if? What if we have less than 10 years, So what do we do now with this information? What do we do with this,
I can understand perfectly well that people don't want to believe it. For the most part, for privileged folks like you and me, we can believe what we want to believe, and there's no real consequences for it. So of course people believe what they want to believe. Why not? It allows them to live, to carry on their daily lives without shame, without remorse about the consequences of this set of living arrangements. And I'm not looking to shame people, don't get me wrong. I'm not looking for guilt by any stretch of the imagination. We were all born into this set of living arrangements. We were born into captivity, as my friend Tim Bennett likes to say. So it's not as if we could walk away and start living in a cave and sucking the guts out of bugs. That's beyond us at this point, because we got these fancy clothes and we got these fancy tables and chairs we sit at. We got all this stuff going on that we didn't choose. It was here when we showed up. We were born into the whole set of living arrangements. And so there's nothing really to do beyond dismantling the set of living arrangements. And, as you can imagine, there's not a lot of people who are on board with that.
No.
And from what you said, it's probably not a good idea either.
We're right. I mean, we're in this situation of damned if you do and damned if you don't. And so I try not to be judgmental about people who promote that idea, people like Derek Jensen and Keith Varnish, and me for a while, before it became obvious that the global dimming, the aerosol effect, was so profound. You tell somebody they're going to die, and they're aghast. They know that everybody's going to die,
Yeah.
but they don't think it affects them. So it's the conversation we just don't have, for one thing. And then you extend that to everybody you know and everybody you will ever know, and it gets a little surreal. We know that we're animals. Sure, of course we are. We know that as a consequence we depend upon habitat for our own survival. Well, yeah, of course. But then we go to the grocery store, right? Then we go to the restaurant. Then we see the water coming out of the taps. And it all seems so normal, what we're doing now. And it's so separated from the natural world into which humans came into 200,000 years ago. And so we're not going back 200,000 years, and if we did, it wouldn't matter anyway. We're not going forward 200,000 years because we don't have that much time. There's no Jetsons-style flying cars solve every problem with the snap of fingers in our future. It's just not going to happen.
So you don't believe that Elon Musk with his rockets and SpaceX going to Mars will solve anything?
Well, it'll get rid of him. So, I mean, you can argue that's a solution, depending on how you feel about Mr. Musk. Ray Bradbury wrote a book called The Martian Chronicles.
Yeah.
Back in, the 1930s? In the final essays, he had the people on Mars looking back, or the organisms rather on Mars, looking back to planet Earth and seeing it absolutely destroy itself. And they realized, the people there on Mars realized, that they were doing the exact same thing. They hadn't changed their behavior at all. They moved to a different planet, and they immediately started killing each other and exerting the same sort of behavior that they'd always demonstrated. And so they knew in those final paragraphs, they knew, oh, we just ended up doing the same thing. We escaped from one place to another. Of course, we're headed for the same spot.
There's a belief. We don't let go of our beliefs, right? But still, as you mentioned, we know that we're gonna die. And maybe sooner than we think, right? It's there. And I believe more and more you have more and more people believing in you, actually. And they turn to you and they say, well, guy, what do we do now? And this is where I think this is interesting, because no matter what, even if you're wrong, we still have to die. So what's open to us?
As I say, we get to die, because what that means is we get to live.
Yeah.
And bear in mind that the odds against that happening, the odds against this DNA coming together in this physical form, exceed the odds against plucking a single atom at random from the entire universe. We know a lot about DNA, and we actually know a lot about the universe. So, yes, we get to die, which means we get to live. So the primary message I'm trying to promote... Really, we have to grind coffee right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what do we do with this?
Maybe someone isn't on board with your message.
Maybe not. Against these cosmological odds, we do get to live. So I promote actually doing that. Stepping off the treadmill of the daily routine of our, for the most part, grinding lives, and living. And more people are coming to me and telling me they're doing just that. That they are no longer interested in the job they thought they had to have to pay the bills for the things they thought they needed to buy. Instead, some people are starting to live more simply. Some people are appreciating more every day. There's a man from Canada staying with me, a friend of mine for the last 4 years or so. He's been following my work for a while. He came down here to Belize. He's a full-time house and pet sitter. And he reached the conclusion that this set of living arrangements was not going to hold on forever in early 2009. So he sold his houseboat in Vancouver Harbor, British Columbia, and walked away. And since that time, he has been voluntarily house sitting and pet sitting. And he derives great inspiration from the pets he spends time with. And he notices every day how in the moment they are. They're not worried about what they're going to do tomorrow. They're not worried about their kids going to college. They're not worried they're not feeling any guilt or remorse about what they did yesterday, even if it was crapping on the floor and they got yelled at by him. So they're really modeling living in the now. So he spends a lot of time with animals and appreciates them, the non-human animals, as much as he does the human animals. So it's bracing to spend a little time with somebody like that and be reminded every day. He also has this philosophy. Every day he wakes up and he says, if I have 3 more days, that'll be good. And he thinks he'll have 3 days warning, because whether it's the grocery store is running out of food and being stripped of food within 3 days, whether it's the water going off in the taps, whether it's any of these sort of slow disasters that can turn into sudden disasters where he lives, he thinks he'll have 3 days to deal with it, 3 days to live. Now obviously he knows that he might get hit by a bus later today, that he could die at any time. He's 62 years old. Right, so he knows that. He just is able to appreciate more than most people in my life those 3 days and those moments within those 3 days. So that's my primary message, is that we get to live. So let's get on with it. Another message: remain calm. Remain calm. Nothing is under control. We can exhibit behaviors that will influence, if not control, a few people in our lives. So, if we have a partner, we have children, we have coworkers, we can ruin their day. Of course we can do that. But beyond that, we don't have much control, right? So we have a choice. We have a choice with every person we meet. We can be compassionate, we can be kind, we can be gentle with this person, or we can be like I was most of my life. Exactly the opposite of those sort of behaviors. Pursue excellence. And this is another piece of advice I give to people frequently. Pursue excellence. And almost everybody says, well, what does that mean? And I say, I don't know what it means for you. But I do know that if you pursue excellence in a culture of mediocrity, it will come with no external rewards. You will be punished. You will be disparaged. You will be insulted. It is not fun pursuing excellence in any form in a culture of mediocrity, unless your pursuit of excellence involves the pursuit of money. And then the rewards are ample. Otherwise, forget about it. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, pursue love. And here again, people ask me what that means. And so for me, that means that pursuit of love dictates where I live and with whom I spend my time and how I spend my time. So I love having this conversation with you guys. Therefore, I'm doing this. I don't like conversing with a whole lot of people. Fortunately, most of those people are no longer in my life because they didn't like the conversation either. But we have choices, right? We do have these decisions we make. We can interact with people we actually appreciate. We can do the things we love at some level. We might have to sacrifice other things, like monetary compensation, to do what we love, or maybe not. But if your time is short, and time is always short, then why don't you at least pursue what you're really good at and do it well, and pursue what you love in whatever form, including individuals and the activities of which you partake. But let's appreciate the moments we have. Is that too much to ask? And let's sort of let go of us being in charge of anything except our own responses to the situation, how we respond to individuals who are mean and nasty to us. And let's instead act like mature adults who actually are compassionate and kind to other human beings. It's a lot to ask. But a whole bunch of this other stuff, there's a Zen expression I like that comes into play here. Let go or be dragged.
I just want to go back to the pursuing excellence thing. Like you said, like if people are doing it, there's no, if you like, no external reward for that. But and so there's sort of two questions in here. So one is it's what would you, for you, what's the intrinsic, that internal reward for you?
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing is at the end of the day, you can look yourself in the mirror and you can say, I did good. I pursued excellence today, and I did really well for the most part. I messed up these 2, 3, 4, 5 things, and I'm going to work on those tomorrow. My pursuit of excellence today meant that I was that I was tripping the old lady and pushing her into the traffic, whatever, right? That I did some things wrong today that I'm not proud of today, but other than that, I can look myself in the mirror and say it was an excellent day for me and for the people in my circle, in my arena. I didn't make things worse for those individuals. That's big.
There's a lot said about sort of doing what you love and pursuing excellence, that kind of thing. And the common thing that always comes back is, well, that's okay for you. You don't have 4 kids, and some in college, some in school. You're not having to buy nappies, or there's bills to pay, or there's mortgage. So how do you normally respond to those kind of responses?
Well, there's a couple of things. I don't have children and grandchildren, and that was a choice too, because I could see what was coming in 1979 when I was 19 years old. And so that was a choice. But admittedly, there are people who didn't know, right? We're all ignorant about different things. And most people are ignorant about all those things that culture whispers into our ear. We can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. Of course we can't. When we say it out loud like that, it seems ridiculous that we could. But that's what culture tells us. That's what it whispers in our ear every day. Just keep going, doing the things you're doing. Continue consuming. Continue producing children. They give you joy. They look a lot like you. It must be a good thing. On and on. So you're right. Some people are not in the same situation I'm in. If you have kids, especially if they're under the age of 10 or so, you could find worse models about how to live. I mean, so that's one thing. So you can actually follow the lead of your young children who are living in the now. I mean, even if they fall down and skin their knee and they're crying like I was after I bunked my nose in the airstream, they probably aren't swearing as badly as I was. But even if they're crying and moaning like I was, 10 minutes later they're up. And they're running around and they're living in the moment. And they're playing with the dog and they're playing with their companions. They're playing with their toys, even though their toys might be sticks and rocks, right? Because that's how creative and imaginative young children are. So we can look to them for our models, for one thing. And for another, yes, I will be the first to admit that within this culture, we need the means to survive. We need the money to pay the mortgage or to pay the rent so that we can put food on the table, so that we can have water coming through the taps, right? So if we're going to live, we're going to be dependent upon money at some level. Even if that means just going to the garden store and buying seeds so we can grow a bunch of food. Yes, absolutely. What I'm suggesting is that we don't have to spend all of our time on that treadmill that some people view their work as being. That it's just a treadmill, that it's just a 9-to-5 job that they detest, and they use it so that they can survive for another day, another week, another month. I get that, and for those people, my heart goes out to them. They're not doing what they love in their daily lives. It's miserable. They're working hard just to persist and to allow their families to hang on a little bit longer. I get that, but it's not always 9 to 5. You know, sometimes it's after 5, and you get to hear the birds, like the ones singing in the background. You get to spend the time outdoors or doing other things you love, and so in Western culture, we tend to identify ourselves by our jobs. You know, when you come to somebody at a party and you meet them for the first time, they almost always say, after introducing, they always say, "What do you do?" And by that they mean, what do you do to make money? What do you do to grind the living planet into dust? Do you do it better than I do?
That'd certainly be a more interesting question.
Actually, what do you answer yourself? You know, when somebody asks you that, what do you do?
Yeah, I tell people I live on an active homestead with several other people, that I abandoned the idea of making money quite a few years ago, and I'm trying to do what I love. And then I turned to them, Bill, was that what you said your name was? Yeah, Bill, so what do you love? And at this point, you know, Bill's been backing away for a while because I'm talking about living on a homestead and not making any money, and clearly I'm not the powerful person he wanted me to be when he asked what I did. So then
There's no social credits talking to you anymore.
exactly. So then I ask what he loves, and he runs out of the room screaming like his hair's on fire. Nobody asked that before. We don't have that conversation. Right, in this culture, you don't walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, I'm Guy. What's your name?" "Oh, good. That's great. What do you love?" You ask that people. You ask that question of the sort of typical person on the street, and they're just looking around like, "We need a straitjacket over here to put on this guy."
People aren't prepared for that. It's not the social convention, is it? So everyone's got their prepared response about what they do. It's I mean, there's to say what you do is there's almost an abdication of responsibility, because it's like, oh, I have to work, so I have to have a job. Whereas there's a bit of vulnerability in what do you love, what are you passionate about. It's harder to define sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah, it's hard to define, in part because almost nobody ever thinks about it. Everybody's caught up in the culture. Everybody's caught up in the must go faster nature of this set of living arrangements. And so they're just trying to get along another day. They're trying to make more money so they can have more things, so they can, work at a job they don't need to earn money they don't want to impress friends they don't have. And I get it, because that's what everybody else is doing. That's what's being modeled for us. That's what my parents did, so I assume that's what I need to do. I need to go get a high-paying job so that I can afford to go to a restaurant once a week, and otherwise slave away and make enough money that I can save for the retirement that never comes. And it's just all this same old story. Everybody goes to school. They major in things that will make them a lot of money. They get a job. They get married. They have 2.5 children. They work their ass off until they can retire. And then finally, when they're 65 years old, they think about what they love to do. Their life is nearly over, and it's time for them to figure out what they actually want to do with their lives. I'm just suggesting that people do that a little earlier, and then figure out some way to make that happen a little earlier.
I'm watching you, Guy, and I've been following you for quite some time, and I've been
That sounds a bit sinister, Olivia.
No, but yeah, that's very sinister. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's like a stalker thing, I've seen you change, actually. That the way that you talk to us right now, it's very humorous, very open, very self-deprecating, And I remember watching some videos from you like 4 years ago, I believe 5 years ago, and you were very serious. And I think there's something in you changed a lot, I believe, because of this information. Can you tell us about that? How did this change you? Because I believe when you realize that we are all fucked, your first reaction wasn't that. Your first reaction wasn't love, compassion. It was, let's save myself, let's go to New Mexico or something like that. So how did you evolve to this kind of new let go of things,
Yeah, it was a long process. I concluded that humans would be extinct in the very near term. And I'm not going to put a date on it because that just freaks people out and causes them to completely miss all the rest of my messages. It's 2002. So 15 years ago, I concluded that we were done as a species in the not too distant future. And then just a few years later, I discovered the concept of global peak oil or net energy decline. And I thought, well, this is it. This is the answer. This is gonna stop the runaway freight train that is abrupt climate change, and it's going to save us. So all I had to do then was save myself, and most notably the woman I loved. So I created a homestead in New Mexico and left active service at the University of Arizona, where I'm professor emeritus of conservation biology, and went out there and prepared a different set of living arrangements so that I could, with my longtime partner, survive for a really long time. And I took it all very seriously. And, mostly that's what we do in this culture, is we take ourselves and everything else really very seriously. And then somewhere along the way, I realized that with a lot of help from Camus, the absurdist philosopher, I realized that the whole thing, the whole thing, when viewed through the proper lens, is not to be taken seriously at all. That the whole thing is some sort of cosmic joke. That it's a miracle we get to be here at all when you look at the DNA and the odds against us appearing in physical form. And then you contrast that with the relatively short time that we're here as individuals and as species, and the whole thing has got to be a joke. I don't know who's playing this joke. I don't believe in some other up there, right? Some guy, some white guy creating the joke. But once I realized that the whole thing was a joke and the joke's on me, it became a lot easier for me to take myself a lot less seriously. I still take the situation seriously. No, I really don't. I take other people's lives seriously, and I try to demonstrate compassion towards them, but not me. I don't take myself seriously like I once did, like I was inculcated to do. As a teacher, I needed to take the subject matter and myself very seriously, and I'm over that now. The whole thing is surreal. We get to be here having this conversation on a digital device I can hold in my hand. And this is where we are, and the best we can do is continue to drive 150 to 200 species to extinction every day. The best we can do is continue to drive to turn the living planet into dust. That's the best we can do with this information, with knowledge, with this technology. I just go, you got to be kidding me. And then I realized, yes, it is all a big cosmic joke. Somebody is kidding me. And finally, I got that. For a while, I was presenting on climate change and near-term human extinction, and I was very serious, and I was using Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief as typical responses to this information. So there's denial, there's anger. I was getting a lot of that. There was bargaining, there was depression, and there was acceptance. And after I'd been talking about this for quite a long time, I realized that I'm sort of beyond acceptance. I'm in stage 6 of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. I'm in gallows humor. I've not only accepted it, I think it's hilarious. Of course, it isn't funny that we're drone bombing children. It isn't funny that everybody on the planet has to die and that our habitat for our favorite species is going away. That's not funny in and of itself. And yet, if you take this absurdist perspective, it kind of is. Because it's kind of funny that we ever showed up at all. It's kind of funny that in the 13.8 billion-year-old universe, a 200,000-year-old species thinks it's the whole point of the exercise. That's hilarious. That it's all about humanity? Really? I'm not going to party like it's the end. I'm going to, for one thing, I believe in this Buddhist-inspired perspective of taking right action, independent of the outcome, not being attached to the outcome, taking right action. So that is one motivating force. And the other is I don't think I have long left, so I'm trying to be. You know, we have become humans doing instead of human beings. We don't just be. We don't just listen to the birds. We don't get up in the morning and appreciate the wildflowers and the greenness around us on a spring day. We don't appreciate the odors of the tropics where I live. We don't have much appreciation for a lot of things in our lives. We don't stop and smell the proverbial roses. And I was certainly there. For at least the first 50 years of my life, I didn't stop and smell any damn roses. Who has time for that? But now I do. Yeah. And that's the big difference for me, is being more fully present with where I'm at, with the people I'm with. And so that's the motivation for how I continue now. That, and reminding people that they too get to die, which means they too get to live. And here's some things you might keep in mind as you go about doing that.
Again, please support the show by signing up at deathhangout.com or clicking on the subscribe button on your screen.